say your name for the mic too? I do. So.
T Bone Burnett.
So for you, what was the importance of using full-length songs in this movie?
Say it again.
What was the importance of using full-length songs for the movie?
I think Joel and Ethan wanted it to be a real story about a musician. And I think to really see a musician, to really get to know a musician, you have to see that. You can't see 45 seconds of him doing a song. And there has to be some connection to a real event. So I think that was the idea, to use not maybe a lot of songs, but to use them in full.
Right.
Talk about writing for this character.
Well, we didn't do much writing. We wrote one song, which was "Please, Mr. Kennedy," which that was for me. I mean, I was just trying. I wrote the lyric. I wrote the initial lyric, which got we all dug into it. But I was just trying to be Ogden Nash or something. I was just trying to make some crazy forced rhymes and make up words, and it was to be a satire of a satire, right? Excuse me. Tom Lehrer, there was a great satirist, I think he's from Northern California. He was a piano player and songwriter, and he wrote satirical songs about the Cold War and about the United States in the 50s and the 60s. And there was a lot of folk music that aspired to be like Tom Lehrer, that aspired to be smart and satirical, and usually wasn't great at it. Folk music would be more, it was a little too earnest. Tom Lehrer had a very biting edge. And so we were trying to sort of use that. There were some precedents. There was a song called "Please, Mr. Kennedy, Don't Send Me Off to Vietnam." So we used that as a precedent. We didn't want to do a song about Vietnam because Vietnam hadn't happened yet in this film. But so we decided to make it about the space race, and it seemed to be the appropriate amount of lunacy to inject into the movie at that point. We knew from the beginning that was going to be a moment of levity, But that's the only writing we did. The lyrics were chosen more than written. Most of them are all old folk songs. Some of them all from 300-year-old songs, 300, 400-year-old songs from England. The Scots-Irish brought over. Sorry, the Santa Ana's gave me some kind of allergy thing. Here's an interesting bit of history. In the Revolutionary War, the United States went from the Atlantic Ocean to the Appalachian Mountains, right? The original 13 colonies, and the Atlantic Ocean was well fortified, but the Appalachian Mountains were completely open to attack. So Benjamin Franklin decided to import, knowing that they had fought the British for hundreds of years, the Scots-Irish. So he imported tens of thousands of Scots-Irish and put them right down the Appalachian Mountains. So in that way, Benjamin Franklin was one of the fathers of country music, you see. So, and that was that influx of music, and then the influx of music from West Africa. Those two things coming together created this extraordinary new thing that as we call American music now, but it's all about that. It's all about the revolutionary. It's all about these different eight or nine different countries coming together in this place, right, and working out a whole different musical language.
I never thought I would like bluegrass music, but I like it. There's a movie that I liked. I think it's from Belgium, the Broken Circle Breakdown. Loved the music in that. You cannot just help but stop tapping your toe in this movie. It's just great stuff. And even when you did the first year of Nashville and Oh Brother, great stuff. And I'm sure the sales did well too. I don't remember. You can talk about that.
Yeah, they did. Well, you know, that's this is our world music. You know, it's all it's you know. It's all our world. It's these musics that came from other parts of the world. You remember, in the 1980s there was a category. I don't know if they still have it. There was a category called world music.
Yeah.
There was stuff coming from everywhere. You know, beautiful stuff from like some women's choir from Bulgaria, and you know the Gypsy Kings were part of that movement. And this was our version of that. I call it American music. People break it all down. I put it all as part of the same thing. Louis Armstrong said, you know, it's all folk music, you know. And because he said, I haven't ever heard any cows playing or whatever he said, you know. But you know, certainly hip hop and rap grows out of you know, street toasts in the early part of the century, where you know. People, the black entertainers, you know, there'd be a lot of these cats that we revere now were street singers. Bo Diddley was a street singer, you know. It's hard, you know, hard to remember that we're just, you know, now they're held in the highest esteem and put in halls of fame, and as they should be, because they blazed a trail for everybody else. You know, there are people driving through the South that could have gotten shot just for being in a car to play a gig, you know. So these are heroic people. These American artists that went out and turned. You know, I want to say this. We're on the radio. I want to say when the United States, this was the first thing the United States, our first great export into the world. When the American record business went down into the poorest parts of the country, into the South and West Virginia and these places where people had nothing, and began recording the poorest people we had and broadcasting their voices around the world, their stories and voices around the world, was the greatest act of democratization in the history of our country. You know, that had never happened. Blind Willie Johnson, a blind street singer from Texas, when the what was that ship that just left our solar system for the first time?
Voyager.
The Voyager, when it left our solar system for the first time, it had Blind Willie Johnson record is on that. That's the message we're sending out to the universe. The poorest person in the country, you know, no power, no voice, no nothing. That's an amazing thing, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
That's something we can't lose. That's a part of who we are. We can't lose.
What's the difference on producing something for Elton John and then bringing in like a Katie Lang? I know it's night and day, but how do you work with that?
Well, it's all down to loving people, really, and being like, it's a strange thing to say, but it's the depth of feeling you have for a person. How it's not like, I'm not a person that brings people on and puts makeup on them, you know, like that, and tries to make them look good or something like that. I try to find out who the person is and bring out the most of that. Because the interesting thing to me, like on a record, I don't care what somebody plays, I just care who's playing it. Mm-hmm. You know, because one person can sit down at a piano and it just sounds like nothing, and another person can sit down at a piano and it sounds like this beautiful thing happens. Why is that? It's something about the person. You know? Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm always. So it's always that part of it's always the same. You know, and got people like Elton John. He's easy to love, man. He is. You know, he's just a generous, beautiful cat. So. And he's very loving. He's very loving in return. So that's really that's at the bottom of it. That's what it all is.
Who are you listening to these days?
You know, I'm listening to a lot of minimalist classical composers. I'm doing film scores right now. I'm scoring a TV show called True Detective. I know I'm probably not supposed to be talking about this. I'm supposed to be talking about Llewyn Davis, but I'm doing this good film score called True Detective with Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey, and it happens in Louisiana. So, well, I'll say this: I'm doing a lot of interesting research into Louisiana music right now. I've loved Louisiana music for a long time, and got pretty deep into it. But I'm looking into other parts of it, and you know, like we don't think of, for instance, Lucinda Williams probably is Louisiana, but she's really the poet laureate of Louisiana, you know. So I'm looking at a lot of Lucinda Williams. I've listened to a lot of the modernist classical composers for score, because it's that kind. It's a scary. It's a detective. It's a hardcore, hard-boiled detective story.
I'm going to see Woody tomorrow. I'm going to ask him.
Yeah, ask him about it, man. It's killer. It's killer.
In some of the press notes here, you talked about how this is like sort of these musicians at this time were out on their own. There was no structure to support them, and then I guess it kind of solidified into a structure. You had the major labels come up and the big managers, and you had people like Dylan who did have that support. You said it's like a similar time now, but there's no support structure. We only have the remnants of the major record labels.
Yeah.
What do you think can support artists coming up now, like the next Dylan or something like that?
Well, you know, this is part of what we're trying to do as a side effect of having this movie, this incredible movie. I mean, one of the things we learned from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is that you know, you can build a platform, and that's what we've done now. We've built a platform for some of these young artists. They're extraordinary. I mean, there's the community of young, we could call it folk artists today, is amazing, and they are good. They're beyond good. You know, these kids today are so much better than we were when we were kids. You know, as just in their facility, it's ridiculous. The access they have to information. You know, there are things we have to be careful not to give up at the same time, because there's such a thing as an access to information, and then there's the quality of the information you get. You know, so there's an issue where everybody's got access. We're suffering on the quality of the information. But the kids, this kid Chris Thiele, I don't know if he played on the soundtrack, man. He is the Louis Armstrong of this century. Clearly, you know, he's come along at the beginning of the century as Louis Armstrong did. He's completely redefining an instrument. He's playing the mandolin with a sensitivity that I would say I've never seen any musician play with at any level, in any genre. I've never seen anybody play with the facility and the sensitivity and the soul, and he's the whole package. He's it, you know. And he, to me, is the leader, the spiritual leader, I guess, the spiritual leader, because just nobody's badder than him. You see, there's just everybody says, "Oh, he's the cat," you know, because when somebody's that good, just know what to do but say he's that good. But all around him and with him and is this extraordinary. I mean, his group Punch Brothers is every one of them's a virtuoso. You see, and then you have on one end you have wonderful artists like Lone Bellow and John Fulbright and Mel Carton kids and their people. You know, they're all the Mumford and Sons and Avett Brothers, and you know it spreads pretty far. I would even include Jack White in the group. You know, as a person exploring all this music. He's the more adventurous. Jack's probably closer to my heart. You know, like the way I approach, because I don't approach it from a level of virtuosity. I go for the groove. You know, I like to push it as far as I can push it, and Jack does. I love Jack. You know, he's a killer.
What do you think of all the people you work with? I'm sure there's a couple people that you haven't worked with that you would like to, but why?
Why haven't I worked with them?
No,
why would you like to work with them?
And it could be anybody, alive or dead.
Yeah, or alive or dead?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's a really hard question.
Yeah, well, let's see. I'd like to work with Billie Holiday because I love her. Mm-hmm. You know, she's the first person.
I know you got one more sitting there someplace.
Well, just even thinking about it's upsetting. It is. It's wild. I don't know, you know. I'd like to work with John Lennon.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe for people like that. I'd like to work I'd love to work with Paul McCartney. You know, I'd love to work with Eminem. I'd like to work with Eminem because he's super bad. You know.
Was Oscar Isaac easy to love?
Huh?
Was Oscar Isaac easy to love?
Unbelievably easy to love and very loving. You know, that's music. Generosity is the hallmark of an artist. You know? So really, when you approach a movie like this, it's everybody puts everything in the middle. You know, so that's what you watch. You watch for is everybody going to put it all on the table, and it's all ours. It becomes ours at that point. That's what collaboration in the community is about, right? It's no like in the studio, we don't let people say my guitar part. Would you turn up my guitar part? You know, you always say, would you turn up the guitar part or turn up the acoustic guitar part? Because none of us wants to feel like we have to have any ownership over any particular part of it, because it's all our guitar part, you know, right? Yeah. So that's the sort of underlying. I don't think it's an ideal; it's a principle, really. I think that's the underlying principle. And Oscar, yeah, he's totally just gave everything.
Yeah, he was amazing. What do you think about the music industry today and what role technology has been playing?
Well, first of all, the music industry's been talking about technology for 10 years, and it's time for the music industry to start talking about music again. I also think one of the problems for the music industry is it hasn't come out with a new product for 30 years. And in that time, Apple has come out with how many new products? 20 new products. In the last 30 years, how many new products have we seen? Major new products. Like here, I can see like 6 or 7 of them right here, right? So, the record company has been reactive and reactionary, and the problem is that while the internet was supposed to level the playing field and democratize everything and make everything available to everybody, everything's available and nobody's listening.
Right.
You know? So, and I mean, the problems with the internet are manifold, and they're going to have to be dealt with. I mean, it's the internet, what we call the internet, which is really just our internet or the public internet, because there are all sorts of other internets, and the internet will balkanize because it's now been discredited and revealed as a surveillance mechanism. And it's not just the government surveilling us through it. The corporations are surveilling us through it. And I'll tell you, when I was a kid, I had a recurring nightmare that somebody came into the parish hall, some people came into the parish hall of our church dressed like stormtroopers, and they cut off everyone's right hand, and they replaced it with a mechanical hand that would know your thoughts and your whereabouts and would be able to control your life. And then I realized, just the other day, I realized, they didn't even have to cut off her hands. They just put it in her hands.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this, the reality that what we're doing now is so much worse than the worst dystopian nightmare of my youth. That it's hard for me to believe that we've all submitted to it so readily. Secondly, art has always been subversive, and art will work with whatever the medium is. So artists will work around it. We'll work around the technology. But I will say this: the technology, the art, for the moment, the arts have been sacrificed on the altar of technological advancement, and that's something that has to change, because technologists, and look, I'm not anti-technology. I use technology all day long. I use incredibly high technology. We use the highest technology we can find. But technologists, scientists, there's a doctrine of ethical neutrality. Scientists are supposed to look at the hard facts. They're not supposed to be making moral decisions about everything. And the World Wide Web consortium that set up the internet did not have. They were amateurs, and they were academics that were setting up a communication system for academia. They didn't have the underpinnings or the scope or the knowledge or the wisdom to set up a just communication system for a whole society. And you see now that not only the whole thing has been a lie, that their passwords are a joke, security's a joke. There's no security. There are anonymous comments. Are you kidding? That's the biggest. The whole thing is a lie, and it's been revealed now that what it actually is a surveillance mechanism, and we have to, we have to be concerned if we're going to if we're going to say we're going to run our country on information. I'll tell you what, you can't drive your car on information. You can't turn on your light bulb with information.